shit, there's no escaping now.
I'm stuck.
JR in the motherfucking house.
Let's do it.
How are you, dude?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Sorry for the delay. I think we're supposed to do this for several months now.
It's been a while, yeah. I mean, stuff just catches up with you and just kind of, life goes on.
It's been kind of a wild couple months for us, several months, which has been awesome for it's just like a lot of growth and getting rid of, parting ways with old staff, bringing on new staff. So appreciate your patience, but I've been looking forward to this, dude.
Yeah, it's been like a year in the making.
Yeah,
It's
dude.
been like a little over a year since we discovered this place. So yeah.
Which you guys have become like family to us.
Oh yeah, you guys are it's such a great facilitator of community in this area. It's kind of remarkable, honestly.
Thank you.
There's not a lot of places. I mean, even the places that I've lived with in the past I've lived in the past that have, kind of this smaller scale sense, they are not able to facilitate a sense of community much like I've seen here. It's actually a very unique kind of atmosphere, which is really, really awesome.
Dude, thank you so much. I think that is a product of, I don't want to say accidental, but we don't think about we want to build a community. We think about treating people how we want to be treated,
right.
Making people feel welcome, treating this like a home, and just like how we would greet somebody into our home. And I think that then equates to communal growth, and it's not just us, you bring friends with you, or Bree and Brandon, they do Flow Fridays, and it started off small and then it grows. That's that phrase, it takes a village,
Right, yeah.
And we've been so lucky that the village has shown up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this place a year ago was a much smaller scale, but I mean, some of the regulars who came in last year, are still here to this day with many, many more additions, I don't know. It's a pretty miraculous thing to see, and I'm very happy that it worked out for you and Danielle. I'm really happy that it's here.
Thank you so much, man. Had you have Kava or Kratom before you started coming here? And then just friendly little reminder, you can pull this thing a little bit closer to you.
Yeah, for sure. I got
there
you.
You go. And then you're just going to be a couple inches away from it.
Does that work?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I've had a pretty not long. I mean, I've been drinking Kratom for about 3 years now. It happened right before the pandemic was when I really started, kind of dabbling in it. I was in college. Honestly, the first time I had it I was down here. My friend at work, or my buddy at work, he no longer works there, but he basically invited me to come to a kava bar, and I didn't know what that was at the time. I was an intern. I'm like, sure, I'll go. Why not? So I went with them to the bar, and I ordered a kava shell, and it wasn't really anything noticeable. I'm like, this just kind of tastes like mud water. But then I had a blueberry kratom tea, and I'm like, oh, this tastes really good. So I had one, and then I had another, and then I'm like, there's a noticeable effect here. I am noticeably feeling something. And obviously I'd, done stuff in the past, so I mean, I know what that feels like, but this was something completely different.
Right.
It was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then I'm like, how is this legal? This is amazing. And then I had a third one. And then about almost to the end of that third drink, I started getting nauseous.
Yeah.
And I ran to the toilet and projectile vomited.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us, man. There's a kind of a fine line there. It's almost like a fail-safe, though. It's before you would ever have quote unquote too much, your body will say, all right, that's enough. And then
right.
Usually, to be crude, you purge.
Yeah.
And then it's not like if you were drinking alcohol, you get the spins, you throw up, and then you still feel like shit for hours.
Yeah.
It's if you kind of get that out of your stomach, then you feel great. And you find what your perfect amount is,
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what the beauty of it is. I mean, it's essentially a form of, if you want to look at it in the way that it can be applied to society, it's essentially a pain medicine. I mean, it acts on the opioid receptors.
Right. That
doesn't have the repressed breathing aspect of it that leads to so many overdoses.
That's exactly right.
So, yeah, I mean, I love it. If I thank it, I do consider myself kind of dependent on it, and that's definitely something I want to work on in the future. But if I did not have it during the pandemic, I don't know what I would have done with myself, because I was alone. I didn't have really any support system in the college I was at, because all my friends had moved away. It was very much a good relief in the afternoon after I would do my online classes, go work out, and then have a nice glass of kratom tea. I mean, it quite literally alleviated so much anxiety from my life. So I have nothing but positive things to thank this plant for.
Yeah, I agree completely. Danielle and I stumbled upon Tanaga Kava 4.5 years ago. She was looking for a mocha latte, so she Googled latte near me. and the kava bar popped up. So she walked in, she asked for a latte. They're like, oh, we don't have that here. She read the menu and saw a bunch of Fijian that she didn't understand, and then
Right.
a light bulb went off. She's like, is this kratom? And they're like, yeah. So she has a tea. She comes back to the house, and she's like, dude, I found this spot. We need to go check it out. So we went back that night, and then we were there every night for the next year.
Yeah.
And I'm coming from where I'm a social, so I was never, I would say, addicted to drinking alcohol. What I was addicted to is a social atmosphere. Like 9 p.m. at night, like I get antsy and I want to go socialize. And
Right.
the only way I knew how to do that was at the bar with beer, with shots. The problem is all of a sudden it would be 10 o'clock in the morning, right?
Right, yeah.
So I never planned on stopping drinking alcohol, but the more kratom and kava we drank over time, the less interested I became in going to the alcohol bar, or the
for sure.
regular bar or whatever.
Absolutely.
And now alcohol is like an afterthought. Like we do it when we celebrate. If we go to a concert, we'll have some tall boys or.
Yeah.
But like even the other night, we went out on date night. We got 2 espresso martinis just as like kind of default. Like, oh, let's get some espresso. We both had 1 sip each, and we're like, no,
No, I mean, for sure. I mean, alcohol I've never really been a big alcohol guy. Like, even in college, like, I would get drunk occasionally, like,
Yeah.
very, very seldom. I mean, I've never really been one to really, like, drink alcohol casually or have it frequently. Alcohol has always been kind of like a special event substance for me. Whenever I'm, if I was going to visit some friends that I haven't seen for a while, hell yeah, let's crack open a few platties,
Yeah.
But there's no comparison, I mean, if you drink kratom at night, you're gonna wake up the next morning feeling like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But the fact that you get like such a bad hangover, headaches, alcohol essentially is a poison. It taints your body. I mean, if alcoholics, they get jaundice for a reason. It really does a number on your body. And I'm grateful, that I never had that tendency to like really, really enjoy alcohol on a daily basis in my life. Mainly, I think because of my mother. She just can't handle alcohol. I think that got passed down to me. But B, just because, just the mental effects of it, the next day you stay up drinking all night Friday, you waste your Saturday recovering from the hangover.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was never like I said, I was never a big drinker in college, but everything just kind of happened at a weird time, like I was introduced to kratom pretty much like almost at the dawning of the pandemic, and it was just a big stress reliever for me. And now that we're kind of seemingly out of it, I mean, it's definitely something that like is still improving my life, because after a workout or a strong, weightlifting intense experience, it's good to like relax your muscles in the afternoons.
Yeah. You love the red tea too.
I do like the red tea. It's funny. It's kind of like the different strains of weed. Like, I don't really, I've had this conversation with my friends. I don't really feel a difference between the different types of strains. I'll have red, I'll have green, I'll have white. Everything just puts me to sleep. It just
Really?
Yeah, for sure. It just like knocks me out.
Interesting.
Yep.
So the theory is that the leaf is like the same plant, right? It's all
Right.
the kratom plant. Depending on the age of the leaf when it's harvested is when you get the colors. So if you think about how a leaf would grow on a tree, it would start off like a yellowish color,
Right.
then it grows into green, and then as it's turning, it'll turn into like oranges and reds.
Right.
And that's the same thing with kratom. You get a young leaf, it's going to be the white tea, and as the leaf gets older, it turns to red. So when it's red, it's got more alkaloids in it. It's a stronger leaf, and I think that's where the theory of it causing some more sedation and pain relief is, because it's basically stronger. They
Right.
say that if you drink it in small amounts, it can have an uplifting effect, and large amounts in a more sedative effect. But personally, I drink white tea all day. I get a lot of shit done. You
Yeah,
know?
no, I
and
mean-
I fucking love it. It's changed my life.
Oh, no, definitely mine as well. I try and avoid it during the day just because I don't like to, depend on a substance to be able to get my work done. But
Yeah.
with that being said, like I do it, like I've done it, I'll have a glass before work in the morning. It's like coffee. I mean, it's related to the coffee plant.
That's
very,
right.
very similar. And, it just kind of hones me in. I just kind of like, I sit there, I'm like, okay, I'm knocking this and this out. And then, by the time it's midday lunch, have a meal, it's worn off, but I got a lot done.
Yeah. When we first found it, it was like we called it, and it's weird with the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry, talking about alcohol and kratom. Kratom has like been villainized so badly, yet alcohol is like celebrated and glorified. If you watch television commercials, it's like hot chicks and dudes landing hot chicks and high fives at the pool.
Right.
And it's like alcohol like destroys families, causes fetal alcohol syndrome, DUIs, you know? And you wonder if that doesn't have something to do with the fact that it's like there's always been this assault on natural remedies.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Things that are natural that you can't patent. And for some reason, they have this full-blown assault on kratom. See, I would rather be quote-unquote dependent. Like, just like if you wake up and you don't have coffee, you're like, fuck, I need a coffee. That's how I am with kratom, as opposed to drinking alcohol every day.
No, for sure. One of the best quotes I've heard in recent memory regarding alcohol and, kind of in this debate field was, if alcohol was discovered tomorrow, it would be immediately placed under Schedule 1 substance and banned throughout the country. That is the absolute fucking truth.
Yeah.
The reason that it's not is because it has 10,000 years of cultural history and association behind it. I mean, it was quite literally, you see alcohol dating all the way back to ancient Babylon. I mean, it was probably the first, real substance that humans manufactured en masse and consumed.
Interesting.
But no, I mean, obviously, it follow the money. I mean, substances like kratom, it has the noticeable effect of like a Percocet, from what I've been told. You know,
Right.
I mean, if that became mainstream, I mean, it would seriously cut into the pharmaceutical industry's profits. Is the bottom line, you can't mess with that. So obviously, the FDA has had many attempts to try and ban it, but luckily, there's been enough pushback, especially in 2016, that they said, whoa, we should probably hold off, because a lot of people, really are very passionate about this issue. And thank God, too. I'm glad people are out there, because I fully believe that if this substance, people who really, really need it, in my opinion, are the ones you see on the streets every day that are just straight up addicted to hardcore opiates.
Yeah.
And, if it was more widely accessible, if the country focused more on rehabilitation instead of criminalizing, drug abuse, and focused more on rehabilitation, it could be a primary tool to essentially get a lot of people off these terrible drugs that have just been flooded into the streets.
I think that's so well said, JR. Why do you think that we have this focus on criminalization as opposed to rehabilitation?
Well, I don't like to pull this card often, but I think a lot of it has to do with, there's a segment of it that has to deal with like race conflicts, like I don't like to pull that card often because it's such a hot button issue in this country, but I mean, the criminalization or the prison industrial complex that we have in this country is essentially a long form extension of slavery, in my opinion. I mean, for example, there's a very well-known prison down in Louisiana. It's called, it's escaping my memory right now. It starts with an A and I forget. But regardless, it's a massive plantation-style prison. And basically, Angola, it's called Angola. It's one of the largest prisons in the entire country. It's a plantation-style prison that basically, uses the prison labor to grow crops, to basically manufacture things. And this is just, in my opinion, a way of providing cheap labor, to essentially manufacture things or do jobs that other people wouldn't want to do, because these people have no rights. They're criminals. They're felons. But it also sheds light on a broader picture in that the prison industrial complex is incredibly profitable. I mean, anytime there's money to be made, you can bet your money or bet your bottom dog that there will be some individual or entity that's going to come along to try and profit off of that.
Ooh.
And, unfortunately, dating back in this country, there's a long lineage of Protestant, kind of very hardcore, rigorous rule sets founded in religion that kind of, say like, there is no compromise in terms of rehabilitation. This person did something wrong, punish them, and the punishment, unfortunately, has turned into profit. So that's kind of, the spiel of how the prison industrial complex kind of came to be.
It's, which is so weird because it isn't redemption. One of the biggest parts of religion, especially Christian religion, is repenting or in Catholicism you have the confessional, right? And you're allowed to repent for your sins, and then you can be redeemed. Yet that is not an option at all, And what we do is we isolate people, and it's like you institutionalize people, and to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Like, this is not going to work. It's not good for society. But it goes right back to what you said. Like, this is a profit machine.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I come from, if you don't mind me asking, you're not religious, are you?
I'm not religious. My mom, I was raised like Italian Catholic by
Okay.
my mother. My dad's side of the family is Jewish.
Okay.
When I was like 6, I was in Saturday school at the temple and Sunday school at the Catholic Church,
Okay.
which was very confusing,
No, for sure. Absolutely.
you know? And it was like that made me push away from it. You know, I'm in there like, well, what about dinosaurs? Like, where
Yeah.
do they come in the mix? You know, so I kind of pushed away from organized religion. I've over the years found a relationship with whatever I think that higher power is, the universe, or.
For sure.
But no, I'm not a religious person.
No, yeah, I mean, you essentially just described my experience as well. I grew up Baptist, which is a very far kind of extremist version of Protestantism in the deep South, mainly like kind of eastern Texas, southeast, northern Louisiana.
Wow.
Very, very toxic kind of belief systems, and kind of almost impregnated in my mind at a very, very young age. The idea of, hellfire and brimstone, I knew about that very, very vividly at the age of 5
Can you
through 7.
explain hellfire and brimstone? What that means?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like a catch-all phrase for hell. Basically, if you sin and you don't accept Jesus Christ into your heart as they explicitly outline you need to do, then you will suffer for all of eternity, regardless of whether or not you committed good deeds or you are a stand-up person in this life. It's kind of ridiculous if you ask me, but that's my take on it. And I hope others would share that sentiment. But yeah, no, I grew up. It was incredibly toxic, and it has had lasting impacts on me as a human being growing up. Various forms of PTSD and anxiety. Once again, I catch kind of a hot button phrase that people like to use nowadays, but I completely believe that it has had lasting impacts on me in terms of like my mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I've met your mother. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Fucking total sweetheart. The religion in your family, was that with your dad? Was that with your mom? Was it, because it seems like maybe your mom is, I would think she's farther away from that now.
Oh, well, yeah, no, it's not with my parents. So my parents are actually agnostic and atheist. We actually kind of separated from that area of the country, which allowed us to break free from that kind of mental indoctrination. But both of my grandparents are very religious. One side is, they practice what they preach. They're very kind-hearted people. I love them dearly. They're part of my family. They're very close to me.
Yeah.
That was not the side of the family that really emphasized that. They were more like the love. You need to love people. Obviously, Jesus, you have to love Jesus, but it was very much focused on the positive aspects of Christianity, giving back, and being a good person. Whereas my mother's side of the family, my grandparents on that side, we no longer speak to them. They're not part of our family. It was very hypocritical, some of the actions they did alongside the things they preached, as well as, just the intensity of the punishment that you would receive, that they said you would receive if you deviated from this Christian life. And then once we kind of told them, that we were not Christians anymore, the backlash that we received from them, the shunning, the condemnation, the judgment that we would consistently receive. At some point, you just kind of like, you have enough of that. Like, you are in no place to judge me as a human being. You are just on the same level as me, and yet you are acting like you're on this high horse.
Yeah.
So one side of my family I no longer speak to, haven't spoken to them in years just because of intensity. But the other side of the family, they're actually coming to visit me in a couple months. I'm excited to see them. And they are, in my opinion, the true examples of what Christians are. They are the kindest, most sweetest people you'll ever meet. So I have no problem with their religion. They don't try and push it on you, and it's just, I have no problem with that side of things. It's when you start getting to the pushy and the judgment that I really, really have a problem with.
Yeah. Well, JR, that's deeply personal, that what you just shared. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's important, right? Because there could be people listening who are in a similar situation,
Right.
and kind of getting that affirmation of their thoughts not being off base can be very helpful to somebody. It's very interesting, the dichotomy of religion and Christianity, or forms of Christianity, because I think that as a general statement, to base your life on the Bible as a Christian and these values, these are some of the nicest people you can meet, right? On the other side of it, there can be some of the most judgmental, non-welcoming, non-forgiving people, and it's almost like you've seen religion be used to make excuses for brutal behavior throughout for centuries, right? When you think about the Crusades, or Jesus was given to the Romans by his own people.
Yep.
Because they said he was blasphemous, and his brutal treatment. I just think it's very interesting how people can use God as an excuse for intolerable behavior.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I try and look at everything from like kind of an evolutionary and psychological standpoint. I mean, religion, in my opinion, was in the, when humans kind of evolved this, their brains to be able to, comprehend more complex subjects. We became sentient in a way, it was taking the leap from, apes or whatever that in-between state may be. We kind of used religion, or the early religions that eventually evolved into the ones we know today, to kind of justify a lot of the natural phenomenon that we see around us. If you look at a volcano, of course you're going to think that's some kind of god if you don't have any understanding of the scientific, background behind that. I often put myself in that situation. I'll see fantastic things like a lightning strike, or out in Colorado, just the magnificence of the natural landscape. And I'm just like, if I didn't have any scientific knowledge in my back or my pocket to be able to explain this, of course I would think that there is 1 to millions of higher powers that govern this kind of realm of existence. But it unfortunately it evolved as societies did, and as societies grew more complex, with the Greeks, the Romans, eventually leading up to the United States. It's always been used as kind of a form of control, because the people at the top who could, facilitate, spread the texts that are associated with those religions, they're the ones that could understand it and read it and write it, and they could, unfortunately, over time, manipulate it to indicate that, we need to have more leverage on society, we need to keep these people in line. And so they did just that. They added things or took things out of context in order to essentially brainwash the population into, becoming more, what's the word, just
docile,
docile,
and manageable.
Exactly, manageable into this weird system in society that we eventually have today, And it's a shame, because, I mean, I tell people that, like, even though I'm pretty anti, like, Orthodox Christianity, Jesus was, like, he was ahead of his time in so many ways. I mean, the dude was essentially like an uber libertarian, and I'm such a fan of that idea. He essentially said, revolt against your government, because they're extremely toxic and they're brutal, and they need to be checked, and they killed him for it. But unfortunately, his words have been taken out of context throughout the thousands of years since he lived, and that's a shame.
That is a very interesting take on it, right? The libertarianism.
Right.
But you also have to wonder, like, the mindset for a human to say, I am the Son of God.
Right.
Right? If somebody did that now, they'd be also thrown into the loony bin. You know what I mean?
Or ignored,
Or ignored. So you definitely think Jesus was a real person?
Undoubtedly so. I mean, there's so many historical, most historians, even non-biblical ones, will attest that there is too much physical evidence and historical evidence out there to not think Jesus was a real person. I definitely think he was a real person. Do I think he was resurrected from the grave? No, not really. Do I think he was very influential for his time because he had radical ideas that really caught on amongst a repressed population? Absolutely. I think he was an inspirational guy, and I think that he had some profound ideas that I really align with, and fortunately for back then, those ideas spread.
Yeah. And it ended up him being killed. I think there's this book called The Immortality Key. Let me just look it up really quickly. And if I'm getting the name of the book correctly, the sentiment of the book is that we have been able to come across vats, clay pots that held wine, the wine that we used for ceremony thousands of years ago. And they found traces of ergot in these vats, which is like basically the plant that they were able to isolate LSD from.
Yep.
And there's a theory that early Christianity was like seeped in psychedelic experience. And if you were to think, like, all right, if you came across this thing that made you like trip on whether it's psilocybin or LSD, like that feels like the closest you can come to speaking to a god, and even if with like what is it, ayahuasca and DMT, often people do DMT and they see the same thing. They see these spirits and these like spirit elves and whatnot. And what do you think about that theory about early Christianity really being like based in psychedelics?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fascinating theory, and I definitely like believe it in bits and pieces. I'm sure you've heard of him. There's a famous chemist named Hamilton Morris. He does a lot of podcasts regarding this subject.
Hamilton Morris.
Right.
Yes.
He also has corresponded with another guy named Graham Hancock. He's kind of he talks more about like lost civilizations and whatnot. That's a whole different bucket of worms. But Hamilton Morris basically, he tried to kind of investigate this idea by looking into some trees or some natural fauna or flora, it would be flora, that existed in the Mediterranean and the Middle East during that time period, because a lot of some of the plants that existed over there that would have contained DMT or the dimethyltryptamine, the chemical, that when burnt, it inhaled, it produces a psychedelic experience, to see if those were found in high enough concentrations in some of the plants over there. And he ultimately came to the conclusion that it was not strong. Like if you burned a plant, like the burning bush, for example, I think that's a really good one.
I think it's the acacia bush.
Yeah, something like that. He eventually came to the conclusion after doing a bunch of analyses on the plant that it would not have contained enough of the chemical to have a potent enough effect to produce a psychedelic experience.
Interesting.
But I mean, I don't discredit that at all. I mean, there's it happened 2,000 years ago. It was like, and that was before like really hard written documents or records were even thought of. People even thought of that stuff. So I don't know. I definitely know it's played a larger role in South American mythology, Aztec mythology. I mean, all of the beasts that you see engraved on these giant monoliths down there are definitely in the kind of figures that the Aztecs themselves and the civilization that predated them and came after them they saw when they would drink ayahuasca. So I definitely know it has played a profound role in the development of civilizations in the past. In that area, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on that by any means, but I would not put it past it at all.
Yeah, I think that I've had a chance to do psilocybin a couple times. I've never done LSD, never done DMT. But it feels like when you do psilocybin that it's like a key. It's like opening a door in your mind to this greater experience that we're in, and often we think of ourselves like, if you think about like heaven or hell, or it seems like very external, but sometimes I wonder if like all of it is just inside your mind, and there's ways to tap into it based on different substances, or even there's like breathing that you can do that can bring on these like psychedelic states that potentially all of this is just like locked inside our mind with like infinite potential to be able to be kind of harnessed.
No, for sure. I mean, there's a part of me that really wants to believe that there's like more to psychedelics than like a spiritual aspect of it, and I definitely do believe that, because I've heard enough stories, especially regarding like DMT experiences, that I think that there is something more to it than just rewiring of neurons. But I mean, a large portion of it is this just crazy way that your brain gets rewired when you take these chemicals. I also think it's incredibly interesting that there have been some studies that potentially, point to the idea that when you die, your brain releases trace amounts of DMT. I think that's incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
But no, I consider myself, I'm probably say I'm like mostly atheist, but there is a very large part of me that is agnostic, that says like, I've heard just too many like spooky things regarding these substances, along with other things that make me believe that there is some kind of interface there with maybe a higher power, maybe with some other form, of not necessarily like dimension, but it's almost like you're kind of breaking through to something else.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put a name on it, but I've never done DMT before, but I can imagine that, like, from the experiences I've heard described, it is a profoundly spiritual experience.
Do you have any thoughts on like spirits or ghosts or entities that might kind of be amongst us? Like, I've had some really wild experiences, or witnessed experiences, specifically with my wife, where there is no doubt in my mind that there was some sort of other entity that was trying to communicate with her. One specific, and I'll make this as brief as possible. I may have spoke about this on the podcast before. My wife had an ectopic pregnancy a few years ago where our baby starts growing in the fallopian tube. She had to have emergency surgery to have that removed. And that surgery, unfortunately, gave her a staph infection and made her septic, and it almost killed her. And I watched her kind of face her mortality in the ICU. And the second night we were in the ICU, she's laying in the bed with her eyes closed, talking to people, saying things like, what kind of place is this for a bus stop? I'm not getting on the bus with you. You know, funnily enough, she's like, I don't do public transportation. I'm not getting on the bus. And then she says, can you tell these people, can you tell them to leave? So I think like, okay, I'm either going to tell my wife like, baby, there's nobody here, or she's in a very vulnerable state. Let me just appease her. So that's what I do. I say, all right, guys, come on, get out now. And she like sits back in the bed, smiles. Her eyes are closed the whole time. And then she turns her head to what is the wall, and she like makes this grimacing face, and she's like, and you. And there was like one last entity there that she wanted gone. I said, all right, buddy, you two out now. And she sits back in the bed. And the next day, we realize she's come out of the most scary parts of what we were dealing with there. And she said, God, last night I had a dream that there were demons in here. And I said, babe, you don't remember all the stuff you were saying? And I explained it to her. And then just a few weeks ago, she had a friend who was recently had a liver disease, something, and was in the same hospital, and said, I'm on the liver transplant list. Thank you, everybody, for your kind thoughts and prayers. But I do want to say that if anybody ever questioned whether the devil is real, I've seen him with my own eyes. He does exist. Danielle gets goosebumps all over her body, and she messaged the girl and said, did you see something in the ICU at that hospital? The girl messaged back, like, I'm literally crying right now reading your message. Yes, there was some sort of entity that was trying to get me to go with them. I fought it and I didn't go, which is, to me, just fucking mind-blowing. And if you think about the ICU, this is where people who are taken from this world often before they're ready to go, right? In the ICU, they're trying to save somebody's life. I feel that there are spirits caught in limbo inside that, in the halls or walls of, you know, these of places. Now, that's a long way to get to the question of, do you think that there are spirits amongst us?
So I've never been really one to, this is honestly like kind of like a aspect of the conspiracy realm that I haven't really investigated that much. I've always just been kind of like, I don't really like believe in ghosts. With that being said, I have heard some like really spooky instances of like reincarnation. Like there was one where this World War II pilot had died, and there was this child that had been born, I think it was in Southern Ireland, I believe, but they described literally down to a minute detail everything about this pilot's life. And
the child did, yeah.
Like 5 years old, saying like, this was me, this was me. And they later uncovered records about this pilot who had died like in a crash like off the coast of like Ireland, and like everything was correct. And like that, there's just instances like that that really make me kind of like question things.
Right.
You know? It's I tend to be like a much more like scientific oriented person, but I'm not gonna lie, like there have been like things that I've heard or things that like I have heard other people talk about for instance, that really make me question things. And then you tie in the fact about like psychedelics, how people see like very strange things, but they all have extremely similar experiences of seeing like different entities that, you know, I honestly, I kind of do. Like, I definitely do. Like, in the back of my mind, like, I do. Like,
I mean, it's kind of like you said, once as you get older and you hear about these experiences, or you have friends that have these experiences, and you talk to people who are not like loonies, they're not like, you know, and they have this, you're like, there's definitely something to that, you know?
And it's not like, I'm not saying like I know. I don't think anyone knows. But I mean, to say that, I just think it's the most arrogant thing in the world to say like, hey, you're going to heaven or hell based on whether or not you believe in this person that lived 2,000 years ago after you die. I think that's incredibly arrogant for someone to say. Yeah. And honestly, I think it's incredibly arrogant for a bunch of like these kind of edgy atheists to be like, once you die, you go in the ground, there's nothing more. Like, you don't know that. Like, no one knows. You don't really know. And there's, I think it's worth exploring in your own life if you really feel passionate about that, to kind of engage in the spirituality, because regardless of whether or not it has anything to do with the afterlife or there is something after this, spirituality and things that people do to facilitate that spirituality within themselves has led to a lot of mental health relief and great, great positive attributes for the people who have pursued them.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that there probably is something else that we can't explain. There definitely is. What it is, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to put a finger on it. But
Yeah.
that is a crazy experience. I know that there are a lot of stories like that where people are I have encountered entities or demons or angels. People are talking about angels that have saved their lives based on the conversation that they had. They may have missed a traffic stop where they got run over based on talking to this random person who disappeared.
Yes.
So yeah, it's very spooky. There's a lot of spooky stuff out there that I just don't think science can explain, or it can't explain right now.
Right. Yeah, I often wonder if we are, because you go back to evolution and about how our minds have expanded, that maybe we're in a very early stage of what our minds are capable of, and maybe there's some people who are their mind is a bit more advanced and are able to tap into that type of stuff
Right.
more than the rest of us, and that's the people who are having these experiences, is they have this ESP or this extra sense, or maybe are more tuned in with their pineal gland, right? There's also stuff about the pineal gland, about it being a third eye.
Right,
And
yeah.
that, have you heard about fluoride in the water, calcifying the pineal gland?
Yeah, for sure. I've heard about that theory.
And that they say that maybe that they're putting it in our waters to keep people not being able to
Right.
use that third eye, or painting out LSD and psychedelics
Right.
as some sort of drug that's going to make you jump off a roof, because
Yeah,
they
for
don't
sure.
want people to tap into this.
Right. I mean, well, regardless of the pineal gland, you can just even take that out of the equation. The fact is that we live in a society that definitely, it's kind of a meme, but we live in a society that quite literally wants to preserve the status quo as it is right now, because the people who ultimately are in charge, politicians, people who, CEOs and
Leaders of industry.
board members on multi-conglomerate, corporations, they ultimately, the final thing that they want at the end of the day is the bottom dollar. And if you have people, in a society, the United States, whether it be China, any large society that really contributes to the global economic system, if you have a large percentage of that population saying, hey, maybe there is more to life than just working 9 to 5 days a week, and then doing nothing on the weekends and repeating that process every day.
Buying shit, consuming.
Yeah, until I die, polluting the earth. If people really started to question that, and they would have a massive problems on their hands. There would be outpouring of rage in the streets, and people really saw what was going on behind closed doors. People, the way that corporations just carelessly pollute the earth, for future generations to take care of. It's really harmful. And they try the best they can to cover that up, whether that's with the absolute mass media programming that we get with this kind of capitalistic oversight. Buy this, do this, do that, or with the suppression of things that really make you think outside the box. Marijuana, LSD, mushrooms. These things definitely make you question stuff. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, just questioning something is lethal for a government that really, really relies on the status quo to stay as it is in order for them to keep making their money.
For us, for me, for you, it's so easy to see that those systems are systems to keep us thinking a certain way, acting a certain way, consuming, buying, being cogs in the wheel. But it seems I don't know if this is a generalization, but the generation before us, our parents, look at the news as gospel. They believe that these talking heads on TV are giving them information that's going to help them. Yet we've seen time and time again that either they're spreading disinformation, misinformation. It's a common thread of information. Have you seen that one video clip that shows 400 news stations repeating the exact same line?
Yeah, this is a danger to our democracy.
Yeah. To me, it's there's no question. But, for my father, if he hears something on CNN, that is a fact.
Right.
And it's, you wonder, I guess it's just, that's because they were presented it was presented to them they were at the beginning of this mass media outpush.
Right.
And maybe they didn't have, they were programmed, and it's us that are seeing the cracks in the matrix, so to speak. Because for me, it's a no-brainer. mass media is a form of mind manipulation.
Oh no, it's no question. I haven't watched cable. I haven't watched cable, and I mean, and this is an aspect of being part of Gen Z. You know, we don't really watch cable. But I mean, even to add on to that, I certainly don't watch like mainstream news. That's just it baffles me as well how people don't look at this and say like, oh, these people are trying to supplant their idea of the world into my head. Like, I can make up my own decisions. Like, give me a bullet point power or Word document of the things that happen on any given event, and I'll make up my own mind. But no, that's not what happens. They give you this kind of twisted, you know, very kind of cleverly like worded, you know, essentially accounting of what happened, and it causes you to lean a certain way. And it's not just bad on one side, it's bad on both sides. And
yes.
At the end of the day, people need to realize that like this kind of political machine, it's two sides of the same coin, and really they want people to focus on each other, you know, race divisions as opposed to class divisions, which is really like the biggest problem, because the top billionaires of this world are the ones just raking in the money off of us being kind of distracted, angry at each other. So.
Yeah, and we've seen that like tenfold during this pandemic, about the farther gap between the haves and the have-nots, and the small businesses that were forced to close their doors while Kmart and Walmart and Taco Bell were allowed to stay open, you know. And I just, when you start talking about they, you know, the powers that be, people will put you in this box of conspiracy theorist, right? But you and I are on the same page that it's like, it's no mystery, it's no conspiracy theory that there is a small group of people that control the dissemination of information, that want to make us think a certain way, and most often to put us at odds with each other, because it's easier to control people who are infighting than people who are united.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain, like, you can take that as far as you want. I mean, I've heard, you know, the theory of like interdimensional aliens. Like, you know, you can believe that or if you want, but the bottom line is like what you said is exactly true. You know, like that, what you just said right there is the lowest point of it, and that is a fact. Like, there is a small, very extremely, like, incalculably wealthy individuals in this world that have extreme political sway and influence that really, you know, kind of dictate the way society works. You know, I try not to like go too far down that rabbit hole, but I am in belief that there is kind of an organization of people out there who really make profound decisions with how the world works. You know, I really kind of opened my mind to this when I researched the Bilderberg Group. Yeah. That's like an insane thing. I mean, it's literally just a massive convention of very, very powerful entities ranging from politics, banking, tech, coming together to essentially discuss insanely like prevalent topics on the like macro scale of the world, like China or the pandemic. You know, like, I mean, they have power to sway these things, and like to think that they don't, I think that would be like a little ignorant. So, I mean, maybe not to the extent that some people say, but they definitely have their cards in this game. They're definitely trying to sway things in a way that benefit them, and like to deny that, I think, is a little silly.
Yeah, but it goes back to that, like, ignorance is bliss. Like you said, it might be a little ignorant, but what a comfortable place it is to be in, to not have to worry about any of this and just get your information from the news and move on with your day.
Well, I mean, when I was in college, like, my dad kind of introduced me to this stuff. You know, he was always been kind of like in the conspiracy boat, but he kind of introduced me to this. He's like, everything is not what you seem. Like, he would say that, and I kind of went down that rabbit hole one day, and like I never looked back. You know, not that every conspiracy is correct, but like this kind of grand conspiracy, I definitely believe like a large portion of it, because, you know, there's so much chaos in this world that I don't believe that like it's like that just by random chance. Like, you would think that this country would be a little better at getting positive things done, when in reality there hasn't been a positive thing done in this country since almost 50 years ago in terms of a massive scale. But no, I mean, I went down that rabbit hole. I kind of discovered that, oh yeah, you're being played by like the very, very elite of this world, and like it's terrifying at first. You're absolutely terrifying. You want to move to a cabin in the middle of Wyoming.
Yes.
Like, but then you kind of come to the realization that, okay, this is the way things are. You can do everything in your power to like just kind of resist that, and just kind of like not buy into the mass programming that are kind of fed into everybody via mainstream news. And you can live your best life and enjoy every day as if it's, you know, your last. That has really been the main facilitator to live in the moment, because regardless of whether or not that's happening at all, you could be hit by a bus tomorrow. You could, get cancer in 5 years. So it's really important to live every moment as it is your last. And, kind of understanding that there is a lot of negativity in this world definitely facilitated my way of thinking that.
Yeah, well said. Like, okay, there's crazy shit going on. People are trying to control the way we think. What can I control? I can control how I communicate with the people around me. I can control what my mood is, and I can control whether I'm injecting negativity or positivity into the experiences that I'm in. And if you're too worried about whether it's fear or whether it's just being angry that the world's trying to control you, your life will be ruined. Like, and you get one shot at this. We think maybe you get another shot with the reincarnation, but you won't remember. It's like, you got to live your life to the fullest. Be kind to the people around you. It sounds so corny, but it's like, lead with love.
No, I was just going to say that. I mean, it is very cliche and, kind of like overhyped, but I mean, it's the truth. You really can only, push love to the people in your life. You have to love your friends, you have to love your family, keep them close, really tell them how much they mean to you, do things for them. And then on top of that, benefit yourself, work on the things that, you struggle with, whether it be anger issues, fear, worrying about too far in the future. I'd much rather have that as my central core philosophy, holding the things that really matter in this life close to my heart, than being completely ignorant of the strifes that we go through and that other people go through, and completely ignorant of how the way the world works. And the only thing in my front view, or that's imminent in my view, is what new car am I going to buy, or what new expensive fancy shirt am I going to buy, or once you kind of realize that like all of that is meaningless, your life does improve in a drastic manner. So
yeah. You're a very insightful young man. One thing that we didn't start with, which I usually like to, is who are you and what do you do? What do you do for work?
Right, so I work for NextAir Energy, which is a massive renewable energy company in the United States and Canada. I am in a rotational program that allows me to basically experience different aspects of their company through the lens of IT, which is, computer science, engineering. I graduated from North Carolina State University with a bachelor's in computer engineering and a minor in Mandarin Chinese. So
really?
I'm basically just doing an array of engineering work and computer science jobs at the company. But right now, and this is kind of the passion that I'm steering my career towards, is user interface and user experience design, basically designing applications, not the actual coding of them, but the design, the layouts, how they function, how they work, how they respond to, resizing. I really like that kind of stuff. It allows me to basically get a job in art without having an art degree, because it's hard to become an artist in this world, and if you can somehow apply that right side of your brain to a tech field, you'll always have a job until the AI takes over. Then,
do you think that's a real problem we're facing, AI taking over?
Oh yeah, I should show you this application I just downloaded on my phone. It's like this AI art app.
Yeah, I have it too.
Oh,
I have one of the versions of it.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, I just discovered this recently, but I mean, to me, it looks like a huge leap in computer processing. I mean, like the fact that AI, I mean, I'm not going to lie, this AI art that I'm seeing makes better art than 99% of the people out there. A computer does. And like, that's kind of scary. That should be really scary for artists, because a company that doesn't really care where they get their art from, they're not going to pay you thousands of dollars to make their art for them. They're going to put it into a computer and pay nothing and get that. Like, it's a massive leap in terms of the way we view art, and it's going to be a big problem in the art community for forever. I mean,
I put some words into that, whenever these AI apps are for art, and it spit out some images that I'm immediately, like as a business owner, like, oh, that would be cool on a t-shirt. That immediately is where my head went. And I didn't even think about the fact of like, oh, wait, I would be taking this app would be taking the job of a graphic designer or artist to create that art.
Right.
So I just started putting it in there. I'm like, oh, this would be a cool t-shirt. This would be a cool t-shirt.
Yeah.
And that's just talking about art. Like, there are these AI bots. Sometimes I wonder if, like, these arguments that are happening on social media, how much of that are people arguing with bots and they don't even know it? Or are people agreeing with bots, AI bots, and they don't even know it? Like, have you heard of the Internet Research Agency out of Russia? It's like this 100,000 person, basically meme farm that generates, now this isn't AI, but it's like, it shows the sentiment of what other governments' intentions are. They one of the statistics is 18 of the top 20 fundamentalist Christian groups on Facebook are actually run by Russian meme farms. It's like how much of public perception is not necessarily being controlled by our mass media, but by these either AI or generated thought processes. And if that is able to shift into an AI form, right, like we're fucking doomed.
No, for sure. I mean, a meme, it was coined, oh man, I forget his name. It was coined by a biologist, an evolutionary biologist, I forget his name. It actually didn't have anything to do with like a funny image, but a meme was basically just a political, any trend that kind of catches on into society that manipulates the way someone thinks or views. And memes have had a profound impact on the political elections, ever since, in my opinion, kind of like 2016,
Right.
like memes are a very, very powerful force in our society. They're just subtle little jabs at a certain political topic will, death by a thousand cuts, it'll slowly sway you towards, thinking a different way about something. And, it's an influential way, and I think there's definitely like ways individuals need to guard against it, but yeah, memes are powerful. And no, I have not heard of that Russian farming situation, but I know that Russia is probably, suspect number one in terms of the amount of misinformation that's out there on social media and the internet. So.
Yeah. And it also is like, it's so sad, but it's like our go-to thing of like information that could be fully legit. Right. It's like, oh, that's Russian disinformation. It was the first thing that was said about the Biden laptop story, which turned out to be like true. Like this,
right.
This Biden's son, he's like kind of a loose cannon and has lived a very like wild life. And he had this laptop with all of these fucking terrible images on it and whatnot. And it comes out in the news and immediately it's shut down on social media because we're in an election.
Absolutely.
To say that's Russian misinformation.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't, at the end of the day, when it comes to that situation, you can't really blame the guy. I mean, he's got a ton of money,
right.
He's got powerful influence. He can have whatever beautiful woman he wants in his
right.
life. He can do whatever he wants, But the unfortunate fact about it is you got to keep that secret. And, in regards to the story, he didn't really keep it secret. But yeah, like the compression of information and the suppression of information, specifically in side to side, like it's a big problem. Like all the information on the right and the left should be laid out there. And like I said, bullet points on a Word document. And people need to have the critical thinking skills, which is something people really lack in this country, to be able to make their own informed decision about what actually is going on in the political sphere of this great nation, in my opinion.
Yeah, unpack that a little bit with the critical thinking. What do you think, why is it people so push back against their own critical thinking skills? Is that by training, or is that by that ignorance is bliss?
I just don't think this country really places an emphasis on education. Like, I think that's the root cause of it. I mean, at the beginning, especially now, like I remember when I was growing up, there was a pretty large emphasis by my teachers and my classmates of, really learning and becoming smart, especially like elementary school. But as you get into middle school, and I don't know how this has changed with social media, but I can only imagine for the worse, you start getting into middle school and especially high school in the year 2022, your eyes are on influencers. Your eyes are on just these stupid as shit, and you want to emulate that because unfortunately these people that do the stupidest shit make millions of dollars. You're like, oh my god, like I want to be like that guy. And instead, it's not focused on like I want to be an astrophysicist that launches, the first moon back or the first spaceship back to the moon. But really, all of that boils down to education. And, this country spends a humiliating lack of its budget on education, and it's saddening. And I think that, one of the biggest things that I was taught, in middle school, or not middle school, but in elementary, I do remember in elementary school, but in high school too, in a lot of like my advanced classes, was you really have to critically think about things, especially when it comes to English and like how you dissect literature and like, what does this mean, And critical thinking was a very, very like centerpiece in that idea. But I think education is critically underfunded in this country, and I think that we don't really know how to do it correctly, and that's going to have real world consequences in the decades down the line when you see just all these kids who just idealize influencers instead of educational people, grow up and become like prominent figures in our society.
Have you seen that, so TikTok, for instance, like if you scroll on TikTok here in the United States, you're going to see like Tide Pod challenges and weird shit, right? And the glorification of ridiculous behavior.
Right.
But apparently if a kid scrolls on TikTok in China, they see like athletic achievements, science achievements. It's unfortunate that that's controlled by the state, right? So we don't want the state controlling the information we see, but or don't they already? But like, it's a fear that we might have to end up being more like China to be able to compete with China.
Right. Well, I have heard of that, and honestly, like, in my opinion, like, it's not surprising. I mean, like, I think that, like, I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes, even if we consider them like a bad actor. If you were China, you do the same thing. You're trying to be their global hegemon. So like, I can't really like blame them for doing that. Do I think it's ethical? No. Do I think it's like right? No. But also, I think the blame falls on like the United States and us not like passing legislation to like stop this from happening. If you see that your young, influential population is being manipulated en masse by a foreign adversary, then you should probably get the ball rolling on some form of legislation that prevents that from happening.
Right.
Unfortunately, nothing ever gets fucking done in this country. Like, nothing at all. It's honestly like the most baffling thing. Obviously, democracy and the way we have it set up here takes time, with the branches of government and whatnot, passing legislation. But you would think that given all the threats that we face, climate change, other, political adversaries, countries that want to do the United States harm, you would think they would get the ball rolling on more prominent pieces of legislation that would protect us as a people, from outside threats.
Well, they're too busy with this never-ending game of tug of war,
right?
Of undoing what the last person did, redoing your own shit. All of it seeming to help the people who have paid for you to get in the position you're in. None of it ever seems to benefit the American public.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it is a money game to get into office, and then once you're in office, you often just focus completely on the so-called culture war, which is just like non-issues in the country. Like, transgender people or gay people, like, no one gives a fuck. No one cares. Like, focus on the things that matter.
Right.
Like real world issues. Like, but that would end up, stirring the wrong pot if your business interest that pays you has interest in China. Oh, you would get cut funding, can't have the paycheck or the bonus go down at the end of the year. So, of course, they're not going to get anything done because they're bought and paid for.
Yeah, well, that's like with our media. Like, there's a statistic. Bro, I've knocked over whole glasses. It's like a waterfall.
Yeah.
Good save. Apparently, 70% of the advertising on television is paid for by pharmaceutical companies. 70%. And that's like television-wide. Like in the news, it's even higher. Something like 90% of the advertising we see is paid for by pharmaceutical companies. So nobody's going to be critical of what these pharmaceutical companies are doing to the American public if they sign their paychecks, quite literally.
Right.
And we're one of only 2 countries in the world where that's legal. Us and New Zealand is legal to advertise medications. And often the medication advertisement, where it's like shows horseback riding and tennis playing and all this different stuff, is followed by a, have you or somebody you known been harmed by this medication?
Yep.
Right? It's like those are the 2 things we see on TV. We're never going to get anything done if people whose goal is profit are paying the bills.
Right, no, for sure. I mean, I am, at heart, I believe capitalism is like the best system that we currently have. But with that being said, I question that more and more. I see, like this just massive influence of currency injected into our political system, allowing these politicians to basically perform actions that go against the best interests of the American people. I think that there has to be some sort of there has to be some major rules that are implemented, and they need to be implemented yesterday. Term limits, like it's something against lobbying. The Citizens United was a disaster for this country in terms of allowing corporations to have political sway in terms of how laws are made. I mean, money is king. I mean, cash is king. I mean, that's not going to change. I mean, people have no interest in changing that, even the politicians, and it makes me wonder. It makes me a little pessimistic, honestly. I'm a pretty pessimistic person when it comes to that, because especially when it comes to climate change and to like the American political system, because at the end of the day, there's no incentive for that to change amongst the people here in this country. Sure, in regards to climate change, and once again, this kind of connects to money, big oil and whatnot. When you see thousands of millions of children starving in Africa or having a drought in Africa, that doesn't affect the dudes living in Manhattan that like have billion-dollar penthouses.
Right.
until it starts affecting people and affecting people here, that's the only way it's going to change. And it's really unfortunate because that ties directly back into the pharmaceutical industry as well. You know, like people don't see that in mass enough for them to go out and affect change. Politicians don't see that in mass enough to go out and affect change. That's not happening frequently. But they are getting paid by those companies frequently enough to where they want to perform in the best interest of them. So it's, you know, money's a big issue. And I think that there needs to be like some very, very heavy limitations, like legislative limitations passed, particularly pertaining to our political and governing bodies for them to start working as they were intended to work.
How would we ever get money out of politics, though?
No, I don't.
That's why you say you're pessimist, because it's like, how the fuck would that happen?
No, absolutely. I think I'm extremely pessimist. I'm extremely pessimistic about it. I mean, I live my life in my own sphere. I try to not pay attention to that as much because I know at the end of the day, there's not really much I can do. You know, if I see a plastic bag on the side of the road, like I imagine, I can potentially like save a sea turtle from like eating that, and I pick it up and I throw it away. Like that's kind of how I justify things. But at the end of the day, I can't stop billions of people from burning, you know, fossil fuels as they drive to work every morning. You know, like it's just not possible. And then you also factor in like, so what's the solution? Well, you have electric cars, but that's just going to overload the grid if you were to completely change it overnight. It's a slow process, you know. I mean, I work for a renewable energy company, so I clearly have a very strong passion about this. It's what I wanted to do since I was quite young. But it is a very pessimistic situation, and, you know, it's something you have to kind of stay positive about in your own personal realm of sphere. And, you know, if you do that, you'll be happy. But just don't, to the doom and gloomers out there, it's very important that you just don't hyper-focus on that all the time because it will drive you crazy. Yeah.
Well, when you talk about, you know, going electric, the other side of that coin is like, how are we generating the power to charge those cars? Like, isn't that a lot of like coal power?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
No, I mean
there's this push against nuclear power, and it's been painted to be so dangerous.
Right.
But I think there's a potential there. Nuclear power could be like a renewable energy source if we can do it safely, right? And but for some reason, it's been not for some reason, right? Because we know about nuclear bombs, and you talk about these nuclear power plants. There's been a couple meltdowns, but even those, like, they caused no death that was caused by, I mean, the nuclear bomb, yes, but the meltdowns of these plants were like poorly taken care of. They had no fail safes. I think if we were to build new nuclear power plants and have the correct, you know, upkeep and whatnot, that could be an option. Do you have a thought on nuclear power?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It needs to be a central aspect of this kind of green revolution. It needs to happen. For example, Miami is completely run off of nuclear power. There's a nuclear power plant called Turkey Point in south of Miami. The city runs off of nuclear power. Nuclear power is one of the safest, most efficient forms of energy that we have. The only problem is, obviously, you have kind of this cultural pushback because they see things like 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. But these plants are incredibly expensive to build, like incredibly billions of dollars to build these plants. That is the main drawback. They're safe. Like, they've learned, like, at least I know FPL has, because of, you know, they've essentially, you know, learned from the mistakes of Chernobyl and, you know, Fukushima. You know, it's important to have, you know, those fail-safes. But it's incredibly expensive to build new ones, and, you know, a lot of companies just don't want to fork up the money to do that. There's a plant that's currently being built in Georgia right now, and I think it's several $100 million over budget, and it's also very, very behind schedule. But there is a solution, at least from what I've been told, and that's like small modular nuclear reactors, basically smaller ones that can be kind of dynamically placed in different areas that cost a lot less to build. But as far as it goes right now, those are still kind of just proof of concept. There's going to be a lot more work that needs to be done.
Have you heard the theories? This is kind of touches on something I love to talk about, which is extraterrestrials, aliens. Some people have a theory that we have reverse engineered UFOs that either have been shot down or crash landed or found in archaeological digs, and that there's a guy named Stephen, I got to figure out his name, but he believes that private industry, Skunk Works and what's the people that make fighter jets?
Like
Lockheed Martin, that they have the power They have figured out how to have sustainable power in a small reactor that could change the way that we live our lives, but it would put big oil out of business.
Right.
Well, let's touch on this. Before we get into that, do you think that we are being visited by extraterrestrials? Do you think any of our technology could have possibly stemmed from reverse engineering of extraterrestrial findings?
Before I answer that question, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is it possible to take a break and go to the bathroom?
1,000%.
Okay,
Dude.
cool.
You're the
Just making
boss,
sure.
man.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I will be right back.
Yeah, while you do that, I'm gonna see if I can't summon myself another tea.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely, bro. Love you too, buddy.
All right.
All right, welcome back, brother.
Of course. All right. Back to hearing my voice. Okay. So, extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, are there aliens out there? Like, for sure, there's not even a question. Like, the universe is too massive in scale that I think that there are, like, countless complex civilizations out there. I think that's definitely, like, not the question. I think the question is, like, if they visited Earth. And honestly, I would not doubt it now. I've watched all those videos that, like, the Pentagon put out. The Pentagon, like, the military complex in the United States, they put out videos of, like, these objects, and they say, we don't know what these are, and they're defying every law of physics that we know to understand. I think that has really, really crazy connotations and really, really crazy implications. So yeah, I think that there's a good chance that there is something strange going on in that realm that we really don't understand. And not only that, but they also came out with a report very recently that said we're not releasing any more videos, which implies that there are more videos. So I definitely think that is a key factor in a lot of stuff in terms of just, like, kind of a lot of secrecy that goes on behind in the military realm.
Thank you, brother.
When it comes to, what was the other question? It was like civilizations about.
Yeah, do you think that some of the technologies that we have now potentially could have come from us reverse engineering alien technology? Like, some people think that the transistor was actually that we found on a UFO from an archaeological dig, and that's why we've had this explosion in technology over the last 60 years.
Right.
Do you think that's a potentiality?
So when it comes to, like, computer history, I definitely do not. Like, I know I'm pretty extensively well versed in, like, you know, Alan Turing and how kind of, like, computers took off from, like, basically World War II era on. I don't think that may. I mean, I don't think so. I really don't. Like, that's just not what I think. But in terms of like previous past civilizations, I mean, you never know. I mean, you know, one of the main subjects that really, really baffles me and that I'm really, really into, and I've read all of his books, is Graham Hancock's theory of, like, a lost civilization. I think that is a profoundly plausible hypothesis, and not only that, but I personally believe in it. Like when it comes to like these megaliths, like the pyramids of Giza,
Yes.
go back to Tepe, you have kind of the pyramids in South America. I think that these are incredible feats of archaeology that we don't even achieve to this day, mainly because a large portion of those monoliths are over-engineered. But regardless of the point, they're insane for the time periods were said to have been built. And I just don't know if I buy that like these ancient civilizations that had only access to very primitive tools were able to pull off some of the things that are associated with these monoliths.
Yeah, the pyramids specifically, it's like, how the fuck did we build those? And they say we built that one, like, I think it's the Great Pyramid of Giza we built in 20 years. It would have had to been like, I don't know, something like 100 stones a day that are like multi-tons,
Right.
massive stones. Some people say that we couldn't even build those pyramids now if we tried.
No,
you
I
know?
mean, for sure. I mean, and that goes back to kind of the aside I made, like over-engineered. I think that, I don't know if we could build them now. It's just that a lot of ancient structures, there's a really good book that talks about this, I forget the name of it, but a lot of ancient structures, especially Roman architecture and Greek architecture, are incredibly over-engineered, meaning like they've been around for thousands of years for a reason because they were built so well. But a lot of like the skyscrapers we build today and a lot of things, they're built precisely to last as they are designed to, like, 50, 100 years, then you repair them and then it goes on, But those were incredibly over-engineered, and that's why we see them today. But with that being said, there's a lot of like architectural feats that don't really correlate to the technology of the time. The pyramids, for example, this is what really fascinates me, is that the inner chambers are made out of solid granite stones. The outsides are made out of this kind of sandstone, limestone fusion, but the insides are made of solid granite. And it takes incredibly strong material to be able to cut through solid granite. Not only that, but solid granite or granite is not found anywhere near where the pyramids were built, so it would have had to been hauled, hundreds or thousands of miles away from where the pyramids are located to be able to be constructed. And then if you take into the fact that they are essentially sitting next to each other with laser point precision, you could even fit a piece of paper in between the crevices of those blocks. It's just insane. Like I genuinely don't think that people with only bronze tools back then could construct that. Like the guy did a YouTube video where he tried to cut a one of those blocks with a bronze tool, and he like went through like 10, 15 bronze tools before it even like made a sizable scratch in the block. And that's the sandstone or the limestone.
Right.
And then he tried it with a jackhammer, and the jackhammer didn't even get very far. And that's like a modern piece of technology.
Right.
So I'm just like, that's like super spooky to me. That's probably the most spookiest thing I know. Like I am a proponent that those things have been there thousands of years longer than they actually are said to have been.
Yeah, and what are we thinking? Like, like fucking UFOs fucking placed those things? Like, is it just that humans were far more technologically advanced and then died off? Maybe left the planet, right? Maybe went to another fucking dimension. Like, wasn't the Aztecs? Like, all those people were just gone, right? They just they left in the middle of the night. And we found no remains of their bodies or anything.
I think there was the Olmecs. The Olmecs are like predate the Aztecs by several thousand years, and not much is known about them. They're very, very kind of like a mysterious civilization in South America. My thing that I believe, and this is kind of what Graham Hancock points to, is that human civilizations were a lot more technologically advanced 10,000 years ago, whereas a lot of people believe that humans were just kind of hunter-gatherers back then. They ran around hunting, deer and elk or whatever the main megafauna was in the region that they lived in. They built, kind of makeshift residences and then traveled around to hunt their food. But what he proposes is that there was actually much more technologically advanced civilization that lived along the coast. And what people have to understand is back then the coast was supremely different because the end of the ice age had not occurred yet. Most of the ocean, or most of the world's water, was stored in the ice caps that at that time stretched down to South Dakota and Ohio, where now they are in the northern recessions of Canada. You have all that water kind of stored in those ice caps. There's much less in the oceans itself, so the coasts and the continents look much different. And naturally, as we see today, the individuals or the societies back then would have formed along the sides of the coasts. When the comet, and this is kind of a theory that's being proven more and more with like LiDAR and whatnot, a lot of people speculate that the end of the Ice Age was caused by an impact, some sort of comet that struck a northern Greenland ice sheet. It caused rapid climate change that caused those ice sheets to melt very quickly and have tons of water just essentially erupt from them and flow down, carving out massive forms of geological formations along the way, rapidly heating the earth, melting more ice, etc. When that kind of cataclysm happened, the coasts, as we knew them 10,000, 15,000 years ago, were obliterated. The sea levels rised at an impressive feat, like faster than anybody could escape, or millions of people could escape if they were living like us in luxury and leisure, where they didn't know how to hunt or they didn't know how to live off the land. A vast majority of the world's population would have died, and as a result of this flooding. And this is where a lot of speculation, every religion along the face of the planet has a flood story. And this is
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is that the Great Flood? Is that the Noah's Ark flood?
Yeah, this is kind of like what he alludes to, is that every civilization from written religions to verbal religions have a massive flood story. And basically, kind of the idea is that all of these civilizations would have been annihilated. The cities would have been reduced to rubble. They would be very hard to find because now they would be completely under the ocean of the Pacific Atlantic, all of the major oceans. And B, there would be just scraps remained because of just the amount of just damage they took from this climate change. And then, but obviously, you're not going to kill all the humans. Like, there's going to be some people that survive. And basically, those survivors that kind of maybe knew how to live off the land a little more, kind of the preppers of today, but back then, they would have gone and essentially established civilizations themselves, or restarted, or talked to uncontacted tribes that they had back then, transferred that knowledge. And then that knowledge, would have been used to construct, greater and greater, forms of architecture that kind of then emerged in the civilizations that we see going on. A restarting of humanity, as one might put it.
Have you seen the movie The Time Machine?
I have not.
It's based on a book. I think it's, let's see. Sometimes my recollection is not as good as I'd like it to be. The Time Machine movie? This is a great film. The actor in it is, what's the guy's name? So it's written by H.G. Wells. The main actor, Guy Pearce, who's one of my favorites. Guy Pearce was also in Memento, great film where everything's played backwards. Anyway, in The Time Machine, this guy, his wife or his fiance dies. He creates a time machine to go back in time and save her. Realizes no matter how many times he tries to save her, something else kills her. So he thinks maybe the answer is in the future. Let me go into the future. So he gets in his time machine and he goes 20 years into the future, and then farther into the future. He ends up in New York City in the future, where there's like a library where you can go in. They have these glass tablets, and actually Mos Def is the librarian there. And then he goes back in the time machine another 20 years, and I think he's in the year 2030, and he gets off the time machine in New York City, and they're colonizing on the moon, right? They're doing blasting on the moon to live up there. He goes back in the time machine another 10 years. He comes off, and now it looks like Armageddon. The world is ending. He looks up at the moon, and it's breaking apart. He says to somebody, like, what happened? What happened? Oh, we were colonizing the moon, and the blasting has forced the moon to break apart, and now we're, need to get to safety. He gets in a tussle, gets back on the time machine, gets knocked out, and knocks the time machine to go 1,000,000 years in the future. And during that process, the 1,000,000 years, you watch the earth take over and just consume all of the things that we've built with grass and greenery, and things decay, and all of a sudden he comes to 1,000,000 years or 2,000,000 years in the future, and it looks like he's amongst indigenous people, right? These people who have no technology, and they live on cliff sides. And it was something that really impacted me about what you're saying, that you could go from a highly civilized, highly technological civilization and go 1,000,000 years in the future, and it be completely reset. And then there's these people, these creatures, spoiler alert, that live under the earth and consume the ones who live above. This is a fantastic movie you have to see, The Time Machine.
Right. There's it's funny that we're on this topic. There's a video game I've been playing recently. We actually just beat it, me and Arnav. but it's a video game on the PlayStation. It's called Horizon Zero Dawn, and the premise is extremely interesting. It's probably my favorite game of all time, and I'm not a big gamer, but it was insane. So the premise is basically that, humans as we live today kind of go extinct by the year 2064 as a result of they solved climate change, which was good, but the company that solved climate change or built all the machines that solved climate change eventually led, after that crisis was averted, they started constructing peacekeeper machines, basically war robots to kind of go into countries, invade, whatnot. These robots were infused with kind of AI, sentient AI 2064. They're going to be really smart, and eventually they kind of, go rogue. These robots replicate and they feed off of all of the biomass on Earth. Basically, they consume plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, whatever. The Earth is going to be a barren rock because these things are replicating and they're eating everything. The humans realize that we can't stop them. They're going to kill everyone. So they enlist the help of like the best scientists of the date to create a AI. A predominant super intelligent AI with like 9 subordinate functions under it to essentially reset humanity after all living things have been eradicated. Basically, the AI will make trillions of evolutionary decisions in the span of 1,000 years to kind of regrow everything on the earth, plants, animals, humans eventually. And then the other subordinate functions, one is in charge of essentially, if there's a mistake, eradicating everything again and starting over. Another is in charge of repopulating the earth with animals. Another is repopulating the hydrosphere, repopulating everything with water. Forget where I was in the story. But once one of the subordinate AI functions is to, once the humans come back and the humans are being, kind of respawned and they're learning, is to instill them with all of the knowledge that the previous humans have learned up to the year 2064. So make them omega smart, not having to go through the tribal era, the industrial revolution, etc. They're just going to learn right there and then be redeployed onto the earth, and they start rebuilding societies. Well, this basically, long story short, the main AI gets destroyed and these subordinate functions along with it, especially the one that was in charge of instilling the humans with knowledge. That gets completely wiped out. So, but everything goes forward as planned. Animals come back, some animals come back. Some animals, the megafauna, the big ones, they come back as machines. You have like machine giraffes, machine tigers, lions, incredibly complex machines that kind of roam the earth because the AI was very fond of the megafauna. She really had a soft spot in her heart for them, so she wanted to kind of pay tribute to that by making these machines of them and repopulating the earth with them. Well, the humans, they come back as normal humans because that was the end goal, but because they didn't have access to any of this knowledge, they essentially restart as tribal societies. They build like wooden huts or wooden gates and fences, and they essentially, their armor is comprised of metal parts from the metal world or the old world, and they hunt with bow and arrows that have metal speared tips with like silicon, and they hunt these machines for their parts and for the things that are valuable, and they essentially live off the land for the small animals to eat and drink, but the big machines, they hold all the value, so they kill them for their parts and trade with currency with that, and it's a very interesting premise.
That's sick. What's the game called?
It's called Horizon Zero Dawn.
That's
very,
dope.
very interesting. It takes place in the Rocky Mountains in Utah, and one area that you explore is kind of like that decomposed Denver. Like Denver is completely broken down, and the vines have reclaimed everything, and it's just like,
sick.
As someone who like spends a lot of time in Denver, I'm like, this is so sick.
Yeah, you wonder if that's just like somebody's amazing imagination, or is it like, do they know something we don't? It sounds very telling of our future, of our potential future, with what AI can do. Like, there's a theory, like if you get this sentient AI and you tell the AI, all right, we need to solve global warming,
Right.
and the AI realizes, well, it's humans, so we just need to get rid of the humans. It's like something that is a true fear.
For sure.
Elon Musk has been raising the alarm bells of AI for years now, and nobody wanted to listen to him. And now this guy who works at Google just came out, and he thinks that Google has a sentient AI.
Right. No, that's a very fascinating subject, and honestly, once again, I'm pretty pessimistic about it. I'm not pessimistic in the sense that like it'll turn out badly. I'm just pessimistic in the sense that I don't think we really can control it. You have these companies that are in charge of it. They're going to make decisions however they want. You have no say. I have no say. So they're going to go ahead with it. They're going to keep making these things smarter. They're going to keep teaching them. My hope is that when you do reach this kind of singularity point where they become as smart as humans, and then afterwards exponentially learn and become 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times smarter than humans over the span of a few days, weeks, that it doesn't decide to kill us all. My hope is that instead it is benevolent and it wants to, coexist with humans, and humans now hold the potential to basically answering any question it wills. How do I get to a different galaxy? Oh, I have a solution for you here. Act on it. How do we solve climate change? Here's the solution. That's my hope.
That's very optimistic.
I'm very hopeful that will happen. Will it happen? I have no clue. I think it's kind of like a 50-50. Like it's either like that's kind of like it's kind of philosophic in a sense. It's either going to accelerate humans to become an intergalactic species that are exponentially smarter than anything we can ever imagine, or it's going to end all life, or end our human life. It's cut and dry, and I kind of appreciate that a little bit. At least it's not beating around the bush. It's like one or the other.
Yeah, we live in a very interesting time where you and I mean, you're younger than I am, but I remember a day before smartphones.
Right.
I remember when we had dial-up internet, and what people thought was the internet was America Online, AOL. So I've had a chance to see pre and post what the internet age can bring. So it's really a wild time to be alive, and we're at the precipice of 10 years from now, I think our world will be unrecognizable from what it was when I grew up in the 90s. And as a techie kid, a kid who always my mom got me Popular Science and I think there's another one that's Technology Magazine. I always loved being up on the new tech and what futuristic cool technology was coming out. So part of me is really excited about this new technological world that we're going to live in. But then I think built into me, the biological human that I am is also, it's a little alarming. You've heard about Neuralink.
Yep.
Elon Musk plans on implanting these things in people's heads in the next few years.
Yep.
And he says you'll be able to communicate with each other without words through our cell phones by telling your cell phone what you want to type. It's sending it to your cell phone, and your cell phone telling you through your Neuralink what was said. So it's like what's that the word for? Or it's like telepathy that we seem to be not far away from, which is fucking wild. You've seen the monkey play Pong with its mind?
Yep.
Unbelievable, dude.
No, I think that there is a vast. I mean, I'm still of the belief that it's a very exciting time to be alive. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be alive because you're seeing essentially magic happen. This is something that has not even been thought of for hundreds of thousands of years. It is such a small chance, just infinitesimally small chance that any of this technology exists, that this exists. That's a crazy thing to be able to witness. Even if the world ended tomorrow, the 25 years that I've been alive, I have witnessed such incredible stuff compared to a kid that lived in the year, 2 AD, that lived in the same village his entire life, maybe dying at the age of 70, doing the same thing every day. My life has been exponentially different and more exciting than that. So even though times in the future are scary, it's still very exciting. And it's also you also have to remember context too. I mean, I'm sure people back in the 40s or the early 30s, or 30s in general, thought that, it was the end of the world when the Nazis were marching across Europe,
Right.
Context is always key. People always have to keep in mind that there have been earth-shattering phenomenon that have occurred throughout history, and I may die as a result of it. You may die. So everybody in this room may die, but I think humanity will live on, and that at least gives me a precipice of hope. Or it's not the right word, but an inkling of hope. A small bit of hope.
Well said, man.
Yeah.
Well, JR, I think you're a very, very smart young man, and I really appreciate this conversation. Are you active on social media?
Absolutely, yeah.
If people want to reach out to you and kind of learn more about your way of thinking, is there a best way to do that through maybe Instagram or Facebook?
Not really. I don't really have a main source of I mean, you can follow my Instagram. It's ReaganH1229, but I mostly just post pictures of my friends and myself. But feel free if you want to, connect or be,
homies.
Be homies, exactly.
Yeah, or come see JR here at Hakuna.
For sure, yeah. Just I'm here every other night. So, just come talk with me.
JR is also helping us with a new project we're working on. We're really excited. We'll tease it. It's called kavacrawl.com.
Yep.
It's going to be a way for people to organize and plan or join kava crawls in the state of Florida, because there's hundreds and hundreds of kava bars, so we're
Yeah.
trying to like share that with as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And we're excited to work on that with you too.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a good time.
JR, thank you so much for this great conversation, dude.
Absolutely.
Let's finish it. Let's continue the conversation a few months down the road if you're open to it.
Yeah, I'm down, man. Just have me
Cool.
on anytime you want.
Awesome. JR, thank you so much.
Absolutely,
Thank
sir.
you guys for being a fly on the wall during this conversation. If you like what you heard, like, comment, subscribe, click all the buttons, do all the things. We'll see you next time live from Hakuna.
Awesome. Thank you.
Boolah.
Boolah.